Okay, Mod 4, Lesson 17. Our lesson objective is how can I use what I know about the relationship between fractions and decimals to show multiplication. Standard we'll be working on today is add, subtract, multiply, and divide decimals to the hundreds using concrete models or drawings and strategies based on place value, properties of operation, and or relationship between addition and subtraction. Relate the strategy to a written method and explain the reasoning used. Okay, I'm going to show you a couple different ways you can use what you know about fractions in order to help you with multiply decimals. First, let's take this. This is 1/10 times, let me get my marker in here. There we go. Where is it? Okay, so it's 1/10 times 4. So if I was to change this to a fraction, it'd be 1/10 times 4, which equals 4/10. Okay. Now, remember, this is also a multiple of 10. So I could have just said, okay, it's going to multiply by 1/10, so the decimal is going to move one place value, which would have been 4/10. Okay. Now, once again, so if I had 1/10 times 4, that would actually equal 1/10 times 4 over 1 because it's a whole number, then that would equal 4/10. And you know how to write 4/10 is 0.4 in the tenths place. Okay, so let's take a look at 1/10 times 2. Once again, let's put it to a fraction. 1/10 times 2, which is actually going to equal 2/10. And we know when we write it, 2/10 goes 2 in the tenths place. Now this time we have 1/100th. So we're going to take 1/100th times 6, which equals 6/100ths. And then we're going to place the 6 in the hundredths place. Okay, very simple. Now let's take a look at what's actually happening when we're multiplying a fraction against a fraction. If you notice here, it's 1/10. So I've got 1/10 shaded in here. And on this side here, I've got 1/10. And I didn't really shade it in all the way, but if I took the x's all the way across from 1/10, so we have 1/10, 1/10, and you can see this blue arrow right here is where they both intersect, and that'd be 1/100th. Now let's see what happens when we do a fraction. 1/10 times 1/10 equals 1 times 1 is 1, 10 times 10 is 100. And when we write that as a decimal, 0.01, 1 in the hundredths place. Now, what if I had 2/10 times 1, 1/10? Well, obviously, here's 1/10 right here. Now, the other way, I'm going to go 2/10. And I really don't have to go the rest of the way, but I'm just trying to show 2/10. Because I can see this one and this one is where they interact. And that's going to be 2 out of 100, which equals 0.02 hundredths. Now, let's say if we want to multiply these, I got 0.2 and 0.1. Now, I'm going to treat it just like a whole number. I'm going to multiply it out. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 0 is 0. Now, I can see that there's one place value for the decimal to go this way, and there's one for here. So I actually have two place values I have to put back in to this number. And I would go, starting right here, I'd go 1, 2, and I can see I have 0.02. So this is the algebra. This here is the numeric way to do it without doing fractions. Now, here we have 1 and 2/10. So I'm going to go ahead and just do 2/10 here. And I'm not going to shade in the whole 1. Okay, but there's 2/10. I could shade it in, I guess, make it easier. Okay, but we know this whole thing is shaded in here because that's one whole. And then we got 2/10. That's 1 and 2/10. Now going the opposite way, if I were to shade 1/10 in all the way across, I can see that I would actually have interaction between this here would be 1/10, and this here would be 2/100, because 2 out of 100. So with these two combined together, you would end up being 0.12. Now let's see how this works when we just multiply it out. Well, we know 1 times 2 is 2, 1 times 1 is 1, and I have 2 decimals I need to put back in, and I end up with 12/100. Okay, so let's see what we can do now. And I really think the best strategy is changing them to fractions. I will show you how to multiply them numerically though. But let's try this first. I have 1/10, and we're going to multiply that by 1 1/100. That equals 1 1,000. That means I put the 1 in the thousands place. Okay, pretty simple. Now, if I was to multiply these, I would do 0.1, and I got 0.01. And I'm going to multiply 1 out, and I got 1 0. Okay, but if you see here, I'm going to count how many decimal places I have. This is actually a 10th. This is a 100th. So there's 3 place values I got to put back in here, because there's 1 and there's 2 in this factor. So you have to add the place values in both factors. So starting at the end, I would go 1, 2, and 3, and I would put it in. But as you can see, I can make a mistake. But I really like the fraction part of them, because let's take B, and I'm only going to show the fractions from this point. Here's 5/10 times 1 100th, which equals 5 thousandths. And that means that I'm going to write it as 5 in the thousandths position. Last one over here. Now this one says 1 and 5/10. Well, how about I just write that as 15/10 instead of 1 and 5/10. And I'm going to multiply that by 1 100th. That gives me 15 thousandths, because 10 times 100 is 1,000. So the 5 will go in the thousandths position. Our last examples here. Now this time I've got 7 times 2/10, which equals 14/10. And I know the 4 is going to go in the tenths position, so that's going to equal 1.4. Our next one, I have 7/10 times 2/10, which equals 14/100. So once again, the 4 is going to go in the hundredths place, so it equals 0.14. The last example, I have 7/100 times 2/10 equals 14 thousandths. So the last digit 4 is going to go in the thousandths position. So it'll be 410.0. Okay, so you need to be able to see the model, which I showed you at the beginning, but I really think the best strategy is go ahead and convert the decimals over to fractions, and then you multiply it out. And then you know how to convert a fraction back to a decimal form. All right, see you in class.